$100 for a stethoscope that I probably used about 5 times. So I probably should have used it as a prop this morning, get my money's worth in church, but I haven't got that. But the doctor's in session this morning. As we talk about flexing your faith, I want to introduce you to something that has just been crystallized in my world, and I want to see this morning whether you can identify. Now, I know when you jump on Dr. Google and you start looking for symptoms, it's like, man, I've got brain aneurysm, definitely. Come on, this week I've got like lupus or sarcoidosis or something this morning. Man, all of those symptoms. I've definitely got COVID-19 this morning because I've read the symptoms and I identify with that. But I want to see this morning whether there might be someone in here that's not just me who might say, do you know what, Matt, I think I might have a touch of the hurry sickness. Right? Now, there are some indicators as to whether you've got some hurry sickness in your life. So let me introduce you to these indicators. How do you feel when you see these photos? How does that make you feel when you see lines at the supermarket and they're backed up for miles? How do you feel? Maybe if you're like me, you know that you've got a touch of hurry sickness because you look across all of the aisles and you think, all right, I reckon that one's going to happen the quickest, so I'm going to make my way over to that aisle. Any aisle jumpers, anyone seeking out that? And then the lady in front of you has issues with her payment, and then that line, there's like 17 people, and they're like, bang, off they go, and you're standing there like, come on. Is that just me? Some others this morning, maybe you go looking for those lines. Maybe you're driving driving down to Wellington. That's one of the biggest ways that I know that I've got hurry sickness, because I'm coming in and now there's like 2 lanes and I come up to a red light and I look and I'm in advance and I'm planning, man, which lane's going to go faster. I reckon that lane, those cars look like they're going to get faster. So I pull over into the fast lane, because if you're driving in the right lane, you're indicating to the world around you that you know how to use your accelerator. And then sure enough, there's that people mover in front of you that just... Anyone else? And then there's like some big stock truck in the slow lane that just flies past you and you think, Lord, today isn't my day, take me now. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone go for a drive and maybe you're driving out to Castle Point or Riversdale? We won't have the beach debate in church this morning as to which beach is best. But maybe you're driving out there and all of a sudden there's like some cows on the road, or maybe there's a herd of sheep and you think, I just need to get where I'm going. Come on, why would there be sheep on the road in rural New Zealand? Who does this farmer think that he is, running his sheep down a road by his farm? Anyone else this morning? Just me again? Yep, Miles, good one. That's my man. Thank you for identifying there. So there might be a touch of hurry sickness if these things that we aren't expecting cause a certain reaction within ourselves. We don't necessarily have traffic lights in Masterton, and in fact, I would say, really we have 3 roads with a few roads in between each of them, and regardless of what's going on, it'll take me about 5 minutes to get where I'm going. Maybe at worst, I can get just about anywhere in Masterton in 10 minutes. In fact, we've just moved out towards Clearville, and we got to church this morning in less than 10 minutes. No traffic, everything's just smooth sailing, right? So we live in the Wairarapa, but maybe you're like me and you think, man, I need to go down Chapel Street, but then I need to avoid that roundabout, so if I just take a quick left through there, and then I can take a quick turn around, and I can't afford to take a right turn because I might have to give way to someone, so I'm going to take 3 lefts rather than taking a right, because... And I'm driving through Masterton, and it's like the good life. And if you're going to live in New Zealand, you might as well live in a place like Masterton that's full of space, and there's just life, and there's room, and it's relaxed. But I'm still like, got to think of the best way to go. What's the best way? Well, maybe it comes out of hurry sickness. Now, maybe some of it comes because I have a slightly strategic brain, so I like to play these games, and I like to eke out the seconds, and I kind of play a game. But how many know that sometimes our strengths can become our weaknesses? And so for myself, I have to identify, am I using my strengths for something that is worthwhile, or is this just causing me an unnecessary feeling in the pit of my stomach? Because we're trying to make, what's the best way to get from A to B, when realistically, in Masterton, I might save myself about 20 seconds. Woohoo. Save myself 20 seconds. Man, I reckon if I took a little bit longer in the drive, I might actually get to finish that song that I'm listening to, and then I'll have more than that one line just stuck in my head on repeat that... Maybe if you're anything like me, kids putting their shoes on is the worst experience that you could imagine, man. Hurry up and put your shoes on. I can't put them on, Dad. You've said you can't put them on for the last 12 days in a row, and you've been able to put them on. What's different about? Just hurry up. Like, we've got to go. We've got to get out the door. Husband sitting in the cars. Come on, wife, hurry up. We're going to be late for church. See, here's the thing. When hurry sickness grabs a hold, just take a little bit of a moment to stop and pause. Am I filled with faith, hope, love, peace, joy, righteousness, and self-control right now? Or has something else taken over? Have I given the wheel over to stress and hurry and annoyance and angst and anxiety and all of these things? What's taken the wheel? See, if there's hurry sickness in my life, I want to put to you that there are some reasons. But I've got this lovely stock photo of a family getting ready for school in the morning. So I've left the watermarks in so you know that it's a stock photo. But I don't need watermarks to know that that is a staged photo. No house in the morning getting ready for work and school looks like that, surely. Does anyone's house look that beautiful in the morning? Yeah, well, you're a little bit more mature, a little bit wiser than I am, Jim, so you just pipe down in the back, because for the rest of us humans, we're not all quite as capable as you guys. But hey, that's actually what I believe out of today's message, out of the next couple of weeks. Maybe there are some things that we could reorient that help the morning to look this good. I mean, look how well together he's already put, and he's smiling, and she's got her hair perfectly done, and she's already made up. She's got these lovely little bespoke lunch bags for the kids, and the kids are sitting there drinking their freshly squeezed guava juice, and there's some probably fresh-made pastries. And look, man, everyone's just happy and relaxed, and there's total peace. That's what I'm believing for in my household in the morning. But it's not currently there. Show us your photo. I will not be showing you my photo of what my house looks like in the morning. But one of the things that I have been just introduced is I've been reading this book, and I've finished it now, called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. See, I reckon there's a sickness that just about everyone experiences in some way, shape, or form in the 21st century. Not just the 21st century affliction, as we'll explain, but there's this idea that hurry seems to have crept in. The response when someone says, "Oh, man, what are you up to? How's your week looking?" "I'm so busy." It comes from a place of, I feel hurried. And so the word that I can communicate how hurried I feel about everything I have to get through, I'm busy. Right? Maybe we can replace hurry and busy. And there's something about the nature of hurry that comes in and it robs us of our peace. And so there's this author by the name of John Mark Comer. He's got a great podcast if you're into podcasts. I recommend it. He lives in Portland in the United States, which is about as post-Christian of a city as you can get. About as we don't need Jesus in the 21st century of a city as you can get. And so one of the things that I hear out of John Mark is he was a pastor of a big mega church, and he just found his whole life, that's like, man, I'm so successful because I've got this church of thousands of people, but why do I feel like this at the end of the day? Like, I thought that was the pinnacle of Christian, the walk. So why do I feel like this? If I have the life that people seem to be working towards, why do I feel like this? And so he was introduced to this phrase, the ruthless elimination of hurry. Just to give a little bit of background for the book, there was a pretty incredible man of God called Dallas Willard, and he was asked if there was one thing that you were to say as a life motto to live by, what would it be? And as some older, wiser men do, he just paused, thought about it for a moment, didn't have to just start talking. And he said, I would spend my whole life ruthlessly eliminating hurry. And so that's kind of the foundation for this book. So a lot of the thoughts that have come out of this, it's really just caused me to rethink a few things in my own life, in my own leadership. And so I hope over the next few weeks we can just start to unpack, because we're still talking about flex your faith. Don't get me wrong. I still want us to live a life of bold faith decisions. I want us to push into everything that God's got for us. But if it comes at the expense of peace, I don't want any part of that. You heard me say this last week from Jesus leading into this in Matthew 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Now notice, this is not 21st century where Jesus is speaking this. This is first century. So just as culturally we might say, well, it's because of the world's gotten so crazy, well, there are actually some fundamental human choices that can lead us to this place. I don't know if you're here this morning and you're feeling a bit weary. I don't know if you're here this morning feeling like you're carrying heavy burdens. Well, I've got some good news. I've got some good news this morning. Come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Take my yoke upon you. Now, the yoke was the framework. It was Jesus' teaching. It was his worldview. He was saying, look, if you would take this, so there's some things culturally there. But when I think of yoke, I think the agricultural pictures that we are introduced to. And there's this idea of a wise farmer who had 2 ox. One might be a young, strong, full of life, full of energy, 100 miles an hour. And he would yoke it to an older, wiser ox that had done a few days, because sometimes the young ox is like, man, I just got to get this field plowed. Now let's get through this as quick as we can so we can get into the next field. And the older, wiser ox is like, no, just relax. There's plenty of fields to plow. Come on, let's just slow it down. Let's get rid of that hurry. And I believe there's a picture here where Jesus is saying, come on, if you would hitch yourself to me, if you would follow me that closely as though you were yoked to me, because I'm gentle and humble. Anyone would like their life to be marked by a little bit more gentleness, a little bit more humility? I do. I probably need to, if I'm being honest. And you will find rest for your soul. You will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. There is a yoke and there is a burden. It's not a matter in life of if we are going to be yoked to something and if we will carry a burden. It's a matter of making the choice of what are we going to be yoked to, what burden are we going to take on ourselves. In John 14, we've heard this picture if you've been in church before. If not, maybe this is a new concept. But Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, we've taken this to mean that the only way that I can get saved is through Jesus. And that's true. But come on, I don't only just want to come to the Father in order that I can be saved. I want to come to the Father in order that my life can be reoriented. I want to come to the Father that I can be sanctified, that the things about myself that I know that need to change. He's the only one with the grace and the humility by which to empower me to bring that change around. And so when Jesus says, I'm the way, we're talking about a way of life. He walked with a certain way about how he went about life. In fact, in the first century, as the church started to grow, they didn't call them Christians. They called them Christians derogatorily, derisively. They called them Christians. That was like a dirty word. It's like, those little Jesuses, they think they're running around saving the world. They actually referred to themselves as followers of the way. To be a follower of the way meant I have reoriented my life around a different way of living. A different way of living. Going back to that verse in Matthew, this is out of the Message paraphrase. Are you tired or worn out? I don't know if anyone's tired or worn out this morning. Maybe you've been burned out on religion. Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. I want us to think about this. Walk with me and work with me. Now, there's this idea here, and I'll pick this up as we go on, but walking with Jesus and following Jesus, it's not a scholarly pursuit. It's not a classroom setup, it's an apprenticeship. Following Jesus is not a university degree that you have to pass the exams. It's you watch someone do something that you don't know how to do, and you put it into practice. Otherwise, the house that you build falls over. Otherwise, the pipes that you plumb in just start squirting hot water everywhere. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I love this phrase. That's why I've stolen this out of the message. I want to live a life with unforced rhythms of grace. Sometimes when it comes to reorienting how we are living life, it feels like I'm having to force a new rhythm. It feels like I'm having to force that I want to start working out. I'm having to force that I want to start reading my Bible. I'm having to force that I want to start loving people. But there are unforced rhythms of grace for us to learn. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live lightly and freely. So I don't know about you, but I'd like to live a little more light, a little more free, a little less hurried, a little less worried. So what I want to do is, what does it actually mean to apprentice under Jesus? To be an apprentice of Jesus, to actually put this way of life into practice. We talk about, when it comes to being a follower of Jesus, we use this Christianese word discipleship, because it was like the disciples of Jesus, right? They were the first guys that apprenticed under him. So we want to be disciples too. In fact, Jesus said, go into all of the world, that great commission, and make disciples. So it's a great word to have, great thought to have. But there's this idea that Christianity without discipleship is Christianity without Christ. Well, what does that mean, Matt? Christianity without putting things into practice, without actually embodying those teachings, we're actually missing out on the best part. If Christianity for me is just a new way that I think, something new that I believe, if that's where it ends, I've missed out on the best part. And I think sometimes when it's ended up with just what I know in my head that's different, these new things that I've learned, I can actually miss out on the best part. But because I've learned something new, I can use that by which I feel like, I'm better than you because you don't know that yet. To have learned something new. I've got my degree in Christianity. Okay, well, what are you doing with it? You got a degree in Christianity? So? Are you following Jesus? Because interestingly enough, they are two separate ideas. So, moving a little bit, we were in John 14, now we're in John 15. Jesus has this idea and he says, abide in me, remain in me. And through this passage, he uses the phrase abide about 10 times. Abide in me, abide in me. Come on, if you abide in me and I abide in you, if you abide. Abide, remain. And I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. So if I'm asking us as a church and leading us into a place where we're flexing our faith, we're not going to bear any fruit if we are not connected to the vine. Okay, Matt, that seems like fairly foundational, entry-level Christianity. Great. But here's the thing. I'm believing that your vines are going to be so full of fruit, so full of life, so full of an abundant harvest, that it's actually going to be carrying a little bit of weight. And what I want to live a life is there's so much fruit coming out of my world that I'm like, oh my goodness, like life's getting hard to sustain right now. There's so much, I've been overtaken by the blessing. There's so much happening around me that I feel like Now, this is how you can get to the point where you might be living in a massively fruitful life, having a business that's just crushing it. Maybe there's some sort of ministry, maybe there's some relationships, maybe there's some new pursuit you've put, and you can put your hand to it. But if we don't have something in life that sustains it, it can crush. And therefore, the epic things that Christ has in store for you, they can end up being the thing that pulls you over. You might have heard it said that the gifts will take you places that your character can't sustain you. See, we can love the gifts of the Spirit. We can love what we can do. You know, man, how good would it be to see people healed? How good would it be just to see the dead raised? How good would it be to see all of these things breaking out? That would be awesome, right? But those things can become so weighty that they actually pull us over if there's not something that can sustain that. So I want you to bear a whole bunch of fruit. So that starts with abiding. That starts with remaining in Jesus. But it actually continues on a little bit. Jesus goes, this is a little bit later on in that verse. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Anyone living a life 100% complete joy? I'm not. There are times when I don't feel like life is particularly joyful. Don't know about you, but I'd like to live a life with His complete joy. With His complete joy. It's a pretty awesome thought. Your joy may be complete. So he's talking about abiding as though it's the vine. So I thought, well, let's have a look at some pictures of some vines. Cool? So I want you to have a little bit of a look at these photos and tell me, well, maybe tell me out loud if you want, but just have a little bit of look. What grabs your attention when it comes to looking at these vines? If you're anything like me, it's the greenery, it's the alignment, it's everything in its place. I mean, this one's probably more about the sky and the beautiful hills, but we've got that there. Lovely green, right? Well, I want us to have a look again at the picture and have a look at some slightly less remarkable things. See these little posts? Look at this wire. Did the wire catch your eye? Maybe it did. If it did, that's fine. If you look, maybe there are some people that structured that way. I'm not assuming that you couldn't have seen the wire. These posts, right? They're all put really carefully in place. Do you know, there's probably someone that goes, if I put a post here, then I have a vine running down here. I need to go at least this far apart so that those vines have enough nutrients. Because if I put them too close together, they might crowd each other out. If I put them too far apart, well, I haven't got enough vines to maximize the space. And probably someone's learned that with trial and error over plenty of years. What you're looking at is the trellis of the vine. So I want to have a little bit of a look at the trellis of the vine. And I want to talk about the way of Jesus as a rule of life. Not rules for life, a rule of life. So there's this idea here that in the Greek, the origins for the word, anyone got any trellises in their garden? Whatever the plural of that is, trelli. Multiple trellises. The nature of the vine is that it needs some support. Here's this. For a grapevine to produce good grapes, it has to have a trellis to support and guide the growth, otherwise it slumps to the ground. Right? So you kind of see where these pictures start to come together. I want you to produce a whole lot of fruit. I want you to live a fruitful life. I want you to live a life full of joy. I want you to live a life, in fact, there's so much fruit that it's not just anymore, I can use all of my fruit. I've actually got enough fruit in my life that it's going to start to bless someone else. When it comes to flexing your faith, that's the type of life I want you to live. But if you live that type of life without a good trellis, without a support system, the weight of the good stuff can be what crushes us. So, like we go on here, grapevines in the wild, they use just about anything. Trees or rocks. When we were in Christchurch, one of the houses that we lived in for 2 years, there was a grapevine on the back of the garage, and there were a couple of wires hung up. And I had to learn a few things about grapevine. We had 2 years worth of harvest. I had to learn how far back you have to prune those vines. Man, you feel like you're killing that thing. We talk about pruning and pruning seasons in church. It's like, if you're sitting here this morning, feel like you've been pruned back to the point where I might as well give up and die, it's probably pruned about far enough in order to see the amount of fruit that is there. Right? But what I never really thought about, so there were basically 3 vines, and 2 of them were hung up, and 1 of them was on the ground. And the one on the ground, it would start to pop out these fruit, but then just quickly they would rot because it was on the ground. And so sometimes we might find that in life we start to see little bits of fruit popping out of our lives, but quickly it's like, oh, where's that gone? I haven't been able to harvest that fruit. Like, I thought there was some promise to that business. I thought there was some promise to that ministry. I thought there was some promise in that relationship. Well, I just want to put this idea to us as kind of the one picture to take from this morning. Maybe it wasn't supported up with the type of trellis that could sustain the growth that was there. And so for me, standing in a position of leadership, it would be all well and good for me to lead you into a life of where there's a whole bunch of fruit. But if I haven't done some research myself and encourage you to put some good trellis in place, to take notice of, man, what we love to see is those green vines and those big, plump, purple grapes. What we don't pay much attention to is those fences. But I want us to pay a little bit more attention to the fences. In a secular sense, the Mental Health Foundation, they've caught onto this. You might have heard the word from Pastor Steve, where if there are not these things in our life, as a support structure, life will fall over. If we're not living a life where we're giving, where we're learning, where we're being active, where we're taking notice of the world around us, where we're connecting with other people, it doesn't matter how good life looks like, without those things, what's our response to mental health issues within New Zealand? Well, I want to suggest that maybe it's about us taking on a different rule of life, putting a different support structure, something in place. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, well, I'm not into religion, I'm into relationship. Anyone ever heard that? Sounds okay? Sounds good to say? Not really a trick question. When I hear this, I start to get a little bit like, what do you mean by that? Because I want to tell you what happens in my relationship when I'm not a little bit religious in my devotion towards my wife. I want to tell you what happens. You see, I don't have to take 10, 15, 20 minutes each day to connect with her and talk with her about the day. I don't have to do that. I'm not under the law of needing to do that. But if I miss that for a few days in a row, I start to feel the effects. If maybe once a week we don't have a night where maybe we call it a date night, maybe we've got the ability to go and do something, or maybe that's just at home, where we take a whole night and we devote that time to one another. We don't have to do that, but I feel the tension when we don't. I don't have to let my wife know how I feel about it. I don't have to give her my words of affection, but if I don't, I start to feel it. And I've noticed a little bit of a pattern in our relationship, most of which I'll take responsibility for. Most of which I'll take responsibility for. But when I have let some things slip in how I relate with my wife, I feel that tension. If I'm not completely devoted to actually actioning my relationship to her. And so this is why I want to get this language right. It's all well and good to have a relationship with Jesus, but if we haven't embraced His way, if we haven't embraced the rule of life that He's given to us, we'll start to feel it. Do you know what? You don't have to open up your Bible 4 times a week and have a read. Don't have to. But after a time of, if you have put it in, after a time of not doing it, you start to feel it. You'll see where we go. So there's this idea of beliefs and actions. See, when I'm talking about apprenticeship, when I'm talking about this discipleship, this process, it's not just enough for me to have a belief system that I say that I'm living by. It needs to be outworked with actions. We talked about this a little bit last week. Faith without deeds is dead. Faith without doing something is unsustainable, right? I don't know if you've ever experienced that in your own life, just because I like using the right words. Orthodoxy, believing the right things. Orthopraxy, practicing the right actions. We want a little bit of both. Can't just be enough for me to say, this is what I believe. It's, where the rubber hits the road, it's like, if you tell me that you believe this, what are the actions that are showing me that you actually want to sustain that belief? It's all well and good for me to say Jesus is Lord, but what actions do you see in my life that actually suggest that I'm living that way, that I think that way? Right? If I tell you that I believe, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, what is the actions in my life where I'm hungering and thirsting for righteousness? If I believe that it's better to give than to receive, where are the actions in my life that show you I actually believe it? We get this idea, right? Stick with me with this for a moment. So John Mark Comer, when talking about this book, he's got this quote, and again, he says this better than I will, so I go with it. Following Jesus is a whole new way to be human. So the way of Jesus, he came in and he instituted a whole new way to live a human life, to experience life. A set of values, dispositions, relational dynamics, and habits. And it's by these, and our habits in particular, that the ideas of Jesus become a reality, not only in our minds, but in our very bodies. Now, this is important because Jesus, if the stuff just stays in here and we don't enact it, well, that's dead, right? Faith without deeds is dead. If I'm not embodying and putting into practice what I'm saying that I believe, don't be surprised when I no longer believe those things. Because faith without deeds is dead. My belief system falls over if I'm not embodying it. That's why it's not enough to simply read a book, shocking, or even the Bible. But man, I've read the Bible for my whole life. Cool, what did we do with it? What do we do with it? The mark of a mature Christian is not how many scriptures you know, but how many people in your world you can love. And here's the thing that I've found. I'm not saying it's one without the other. Don't hear that either. But if I'm not outworking my love, and do you know what happens? If I'm not outworking my love, what tends to happen, and I know we've read this before maybe, knowledge puffs up. Well, I've got this new thought that I've been learning all about. I've got this new theological system that I've created. And it starts to puff up, but love builds up. And in my own life, maybe there are some reasons that I'm preaching this because I'm standing in a place of going, come on, what I'm embodying is where we're going. And I don't want us to just create more head awareness without it actually influencing how we act, how we live in the world. Why? Because I don't want you to live a life full of so much fruit that it just pulls you over, that it pulls us into that place of hurry. If we want to enter the kingdom, come on, Jesus, he instituted a new reality. His whole life was about the kingdom of heaven. His whole life was saying, look, it's here. If we want to enter the kingdom that Jesus opened, we have to follow or apprentice under him into its reality. Come on, I don't know if you're sitting here this morning saying, Matt, I'd like to be an apprentice. I want to see more of the kingdom of heaven outwork itself in my life. Well, I can't just tell you what that means. We actually have to get on and we have to do some things. Come and follow me is an ongoing invitation. Come and follow me for Jesus is not a one-time decision that I make. It's a decision that I make every day. What does it mean to be a follower of Christ? Pick up your cross every day and follow Jesus. There's this new way to be human. And I kind of want to have a little bit of a look at this new way to be human. Stephen Covey, I don't know if you like to read leadership books, but he wrote a book, 7 Habits of the something or other. I should have remembered the title. That's okay. You might have heard it. He says, we feel at peace when our schedule is aligned to our values. Now notice that's not in the Bible, but I think if Jesus heard that, he would think, yeah, that sounds pretty good. We feel at peace when our schedule is aligned to our values. What we value when our day is marked around that. Now, our schedule can be totally full, and I feel like in my own life, when I am putting a lot of time into the things that I value, I don't feel busy, I don't feel stressed, when I'm putting a lot of time into things that I don't value, that's when I start to feel the gap. Maybe that's for someone else here this morning. But in fact, Jesus, he, seen as that wasn't scripture, here's some from it. Seek first the kingdom of God, and what else will be added to you? All the other things. What were the other things? Well, in that context, it was talking about the needs of life. Breaking it down. In the Mediterranean culture in which they inhabited, the only two things you really needed was food and clothing. Right? You could live a life just... In New Zealand, we have to add shelter because it gets pretty cold. Right? But so as we embark on this life of following Jesus, come on, it's this thing here. What are we putting in first? Seek first the kingdom of God. What is the thing that I am putting? Now, first maybe means first in terms of numerically, but maybe first means first in terms of importance. Maybe first means the best. Maybe we've talked about first fruits before. So we're talking about flex your faith, and I want to see a whole bunch of incredibly succulent grapes growing out of my own life, and I want to see a whole bunch of succulent grapes growing out of your life. But I reckon what we can take responsibility for is not that fruit. See, the vine just naturally produces fruit. As you abide in Jesus, you will naturally produce a lot of fruit. That's just part of how you've been created, how the world is set up. That's Jesus' promise. But what I think that we can take responsibility for is the support structure, the thing that sustains that. Now, I know that looks like a fence, but for the sake of the picture, it's a trellis. So when I'm leading you into seeing fruit, what I'm actually feeling called to is to just remind us the importance of the trellis. At Equippers Church, we've put some certain labels, but you probably have found that as you've been in church for any length of time, some of these things are pretty familiar. I mean, we put this word e-groups, but if you've been in church, home groups, connect groups, life groups, there's that small gathering, right? So we gather on Sundays, we spend some time praying. Praying sort of involves silence, meditation, reading scripture. That kind of all comes under the same picture. I'll get to that in a minute. E-groups, we have small groups where we gather together. E-teams, we find a place of service. And giving is, like Kawana talked about this morning, we trust God in all of those areas. And so, do you know what? This stuff here isn't the fruit of the Christian walk. Maybe in the past I've thought that it is. If I just examine my own motivations when it comes to leadership, maybe I've examined the fruit in someone's life based on, like, is someone coming to church regularly? Do you know what that's not? What I'm starting to realize, what I'm maybe starting to have to repent of in a few ways? That's not evidence of fruit in someone's life. Wow. Is a guy standing on stage who pastors a church actually saying that on a Sunday morning? Do you know what? Tithing isn't evidence of fruit in your life. Do you know what? Turning up to e-group, that's not an evidence of fruit. Do you know what those things are? That's the fence, that's the support system and the structure that if that's not there, when the fruit of God comes, it's going to crush us. The weight of what He's got, man, He's got so much in store for you that it will blow your mind. What you're called to. What you're called to do in this world, to be so fruitful. Do you know what? That's the earliest mandate for humanity. Go into all the world, multiply, and be fruitful. You're going to be fruitful. Maybe you have been fruitful in the past. Maybe you feel like sometimes some of that fruit's gone a bit rotten before you could harvest it. Well, kind of looking at this. Now, maybe when I say these things, right, we turn up to church every week. We tithe. We turn up to E-group. We serve somewhere. Maybe in your head this little bomb goes off like, not another one of these messages. Why is he saying this stuff again? Well, I'm kind of saying it again because in my own life, I believe I'm saying this out of a completely different place. And I believe that over the next few years, what we're going to establish in terms of a rule of life is going to establish such a support network for the fruit that God wants to bring. Do you know what? There is so much to do here in the Wairarapa. There are so many people to bless. There are so many lives to be transformed. There are so many relationships to be restored. Maybe you feel that way because in the past, maybe the trellis has been treated as the fruit. Maybe I've done that. Maybe you've sat in church and I've done that. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe there's been someone else in church leadership or in life that have communicated these things in such a way as though that was the end result. But what I feel like I'm sort of trying to say something from a different place. I'm saying the same thing, but in my own world, I believe that I need to say this out of a different motivation. I want to put such a strong support structure in your life that when you're walking into that marketplace and bringing change in your school, in your workplace, wherever it is, you're able to sustain that because we're going into the world. The world can take us out if we're not careful. Well, I think the reason that you might be feeling like, not another thing, is because they are asking you to add things into your life. Right? Adding in 2 hours to go to church on a Sunday morning. I have to add that into my week each week. I have to add in giving. I don't even feel like I've got enough money to make it through the week. How is he expecting me to? I don't feel like there's enough hours in the day for the life that I feel that I'm living. How could he possibly ask me to add in more? And maybe in my own life, I'm a little bit sick and tired of always feeling like I'm expecting someone else to do more when I'm not equipping them and empowering them with the tools to live a life of overflow, where it no longer feels like I'm having to add. And I'm kind of looking at this a little bit today. So I did the math. 2 + 2 is 4. I come out to church for a couple hours on a Sunday, right? Maybe half an hour each day and an hour on Sunday, I pray, read the Bible. Down there, so that's an hour a day of praying and reading the Bible. Well, we've been led into that before. We've been suggested that's a good idea. It takes me 2 hours or maybe a little bit longer with a bit of driving to attend to E-group. Maybe for some of you, maybe like you're on the creative team, it's a little bit longer than 2 hours each week because you turn up to church early and you come out through the week. But let's say we averaged out the structure and support system that we're putting into our Christian walk. Do you know what it comes out? That comes out at 14 hours a week. Does that sound like a lot? Sounds like quite a few. Well, this thought came to me as I was driving past the Clearville Bakery through this week. Do you know, if I divide 14 by 168, that's how many hours there are in the week, I get up to less than 10%. And you might see where I might start to go with this. When it comes to giving, what does the Lord ask of us to give in order to start to trust Him? 10%. Maybe this was a new thought for me. Maybe you've thought about this before. But maybe when it comes to trusting Him with my most valuable resource, my time, well, I don't feel like I have enough space for this, Matt. Maybe some of you, you're feeling that shrinking. Not another one of these messages. Do you know why? I want to put it to us that maybe there's no margin in our world. Maybe when someone asks you to give or to connect or turn up or do something, you're like, there's just no space left. Well, do you know what the result of a life without margin is? Hurry sickness. How do I take this back full circle? Do you see, if I can't equip you with the tools to live a life with margin, it is always going to feel like, not another thing He's asking me to do. So I kind of feel like what I want to put my time, my energy to in a leadership capacity is actually giving you some tools, because this stuff for me has just become, it's normal in my world. Do you know, I put those 14 hours up, but to get to a tithe of my week, there's an extra 2.8 hours. Maybe that 2.8 hours is baking a meal for someone or helping them move. Maybe those 2.8 hours, who knows what those 2.8 hours might look like. But if I can put that structure, see, we've preached this from a money point of view. When I tithe, the rest of the 90% is more fruitful. Well, in my own life, why do I not put that same belief into my time? Because I actually value my time more than my money. I don't know about you, but I would far rather give you $100 than 100 minutes. It's a lot easier for me to do. Why? Because my time is my most valuable resource. But here's the thing. If I'm not trusting God with my time, I'm actually not creating that where the 90% is going to be more fruitful. See, if I can give God the first of my time, what am I believing that is? That is me being discipled. That is me following. That is me putting structure into life. Adding, more. How many times have we heard that? More. Come on, there's so much more in store. God's got more for us. If we're not operating from a healthy place, that makes us feel sick. I don't know if you've ever felt that before, but I just feel like as this message has been brewing, that's what I feel like is the thing that God wants to bring in this next season. So, if I'm going to be able to add in some things, maybe I first need to subtract some things. Maybe over this next season, there's something of a journey for us to go on together where that foundational discipleship, the acting, the living out of that life, we put that into practice. Maybe we can go on, because we know what those things are. We've heard them before, right? But what I want to lean into over the next couple of weeks are some things that we can start to take out. Because I want to equip you with some tools by which will enable us to create margin. Because as we create margin, man, for me, why am I going to do this? Because I'm a little bit sick of being annoyed if I can't drive 109 kilometers an hour on my way to work. Because that's not healthy. I'm a little bit sick and tired of feeling like I'm having to rush or find the fastest way to get from point A to point. I'm a little bit sick of having that hurry within my life. I'm a little bit sick of not feeling like I'm just going through life walking with ease. Man, when Jesus came, we'll get to a little bit of this idea of slowing. I used to consider it a point of pride that I would like walk around town like, why are you getting in the way? Don't get in the way. Move out of the way. Listen to my footsteps so you can, man, look how fast I can walk. Woo! I'm such a fast walker. Do you know the image I have of Jesus is not, I've got to get there. Oh, man. Oh. Why are these people walking in my way? Get out of my way, sick people coming through. Got important things to do. Got a world to save. Move out of my way. The picture I have of Jesus is a little bit more, I got time to respond. I've seen your hurt. I've been moved by compassion. And I feel like I've got time for you to interrupt my world. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to do these. Next week, we might talk about silence and solitude and the Sabbath. What does that mean? Well, it's a whole new way to live. Whole new way to live. It used to, from the time that Jesus was born, it took 1,250 years for the human knowledge base to double. For it to double again, it took about 500 years. You'll see where this pattern goes. For it to double again, it took about 250 years. Do you know where we live today? We live in a thing called the information age. The amount of information that humans have available, it's doubled by lunchtime. There is so much stuff that's assaulting our worlds. Do you know what the most countercultural thing that we can do is? Do you know the most countercultural thing we can do is not actually turn up to church and read our Bible and pray. Those things will sustain what we can do. That's the trellis. The most countercultural thing we can do is have a Sabbath, not a day off, to enter into the Sabbath. What does that mean? We'll have a look at that. Let's explore that. To simplify life. What does it mean? The most countercultural thing we can do today is not equate success with excess. What's the most countercultural thing we can do? Walk slowly in the supermarket. Now, yep, I'll say maybe if it's driving, like, just go at 100. Don't be one of those people going 90, because like us that are still working through our flesh will just get annoyed. So just got to let myself off the hook a little bit. But why do I feel like I need to eke out every kilometre an hour, every word per second, every moment? Do you know why I feel like I have to rush through life? It's because I don't have a particularly good picture of eternity. Jesus came to give us life in full abundance. He came to bring an eternal life. Do you know why I believe Jesus wasn't in too much of a hurry? Because he had forever. Do you know that probably the most human thing we can do is worry about how much time we don't have? What's the most countercultural thing that we can do? Remind ourselves that we are living for eternity, but that starts today. Why can I slow down? Why can I bring this stuff into my world? Because I've got forever. Matt, you're going to die. Yeah, I will eventually. I might get this so right that I get taken away in a chariot of fire and I can skip through death. I don't know. I'm believing for that. That would be pretty awesome. But come on, if we're living out of eternity today, do you know what that lets us do? Slow down, be moved by compassion, and do something about it. Thanks, team. Yeah.